Welcome back for part 4 of this series on the Chronicles of Drunagor. In the previous video, our heroes managed to obtain the Tome of Darkness tile placement rules, and in this video we're going to crack open that book and see what it contains. This video shouldn't take too long because its sole purpose is to learn about these polyomino darkness tiles, how to place them, and what happens when a figure stands on them. For this video I'll be using a couple of new heroes, Devron and Willow, both from the Spoils of War box. They're going to help me demonstrate how horrible the darkness is, and after this video they'll probably never speak to me again. As you may already know, darkness is harmful to heroes and their allies, and beneficial to monsters. We'll begin by learning how to place darkness tiles, then towards the end of this video we'll look at the effect it has on the figures which it touches. In general, darkness will spread across the board, attempting to reach the strongest hero who isn't already standing on darkness. The strongest hero is the one with the most hit points. And if two or more heroes are tied for the most hit points, the hero who comes earliest on the initiative track is considered the strongest. Darkness can come from any of these spawn icons, there's one printed on every map tile, or it can come from the edge of any darkness which is already on the map. When you're setting up a map, spawn icons may sometimes get covered by a dungeon tray or another map tile, in which case the icon has no effect. But note that nothing else can obscure a spawn icon. Even if a hero tries standing on top of a spawn icon, darkness will just come bubbling up between their toes, which is just icky. The initiative track typically contains a rune card, such as this darkness hunting card, which activates at the end of each round. It will tell you to draw 1 or 2 tokens from the rune bag, and each token has a rune on one side and a tile shape on the other. Let's suppose we drew this token at the end of the first round. There's no darkness on the board yet, so it will need to come from a spawn icon. It will try to reach Willow, since she's the strongest hero. In this case it can't reach her, but it will try to get as close as possible. For example, we could place it like this, or like this. Either option will bring the darkness adjacent to Willow. Notice that it didn't target Devron, even though it could have reached him, like this. The darkness is single-minded in trying to reach the strongest hero. This is in contrast to monsters, who prefer to attack heroes they can reach. Also, notice that the darkness goes underneath the chest token. In fact, darkness can be placed underneath anything, with the obvious exceptions of the dungeon trays, map tiles, and other darkness tiles. Now that we've placed the tile, I'll put the rune token on top of the matching rune on the initiative track. Some monsters have an X on their card, in which case the X refers to the number of rune tokens on its part of the initiative track. Rune tokens may have other in-game effects as well. And finally, the darkness hunting card tells us to flip it to the opposite side. And the darkness turn is over. Now let's imagine that another round has taken place. Our heroes have moved a little, and we've reached the rune card again. This time it tells us to draw 2 runes, which we'll resolve one at a time. First up we have this shape, and since Willow is still the strongest hero, it's going to target her, and this time it's going to reach her. In the last round we saw darkness come from the spawn icon, but new darkness tiles can also connect to any darkness which has already been placed, as long as it shares at least one edge. For example, I couldn't place the new tile like this, because the touching corners aren't considered connected. As mentioned, darkness will target only one hero at a time, so right now it's ignoring Devron. For example, we could place it either like this, underneath both heroes, or like this, which still reaches its target, but it doesn't catch Devron. And I think I'll choose a placement which doesn't catch Devron. It can be easy to forget that darkness only targets one hero at a time, partly because it's in contrast to how monsters behave. As we'll see in a later video, monsters love nothing more than targeting multiple heroes at once. Since the darkness reached Willow, she'll suffer 2 points of darkness damage. This is referred to as being caught. I'll place the rune token on the initiative track and draw the second token. Obviously the darkness is going to target Devron this time, since he's now the strongest hero who's not already standing on top of darkness. And clearly that's going to reach him. I could place it like this, but that would leave Willow surrounded by darkness, which might not be such a good idea. Instead, I think I'll place it here. And he suffers 2 points of non-preventable darkness damage. As a quick reminder, non-preventable damage can't be reduced by shield tokens, reactions, or other such techniques. but on your travels you may discover some effects which do help to mitigate darkness damage. And that's the end of the darkness hunting turn, so I'll flip the card. We'll move on to the next round, but this time we'll take a closer look at what the heroes might do on their turns. Willow goes first, and let's suppose she wants to use the interaction token over here on the left. Of course, she'll need to be adjacent to it, but there are darkness tiles in her path, and stepping on one will cause her to take damage. She does have a green agility skill on her hero board, which enables her to jump 3 spaces. That would be perfect, because it would enable her to jump over here without stepping onto any darkness tiles. But unfortunately she can't use that skill because she's run out of green action cubes. Another option would be to just move across the board using ordinary movement. If she chose to do that, her very first step onto a darkness tile would cause her 2 points of darkness damage, taking her health down to 9. But the rest of her movement wouldn't cause any damage because characters only take such damage once per turn. As an aside, this rule applies to every type of harmful terrain. Characters only suffer their effects once per turn. For example, if Willow were to walk all the way across this boiling hot lava, she'd suffer burn 2 on her very first step, but no other lava effects for the rest of her turn. Instead, let's suppose that Willow decides not to move at all. If a hero is standing on top of a darkness tile at the end of their turn, and they haven't taken any darkness damage that turn, then they suffer 2 points of darkness damage. So Willow's health goes down to 9 and her turn ends. Devron also fails to move on his turn, so he takes 2 points of darkness damage, taking him down to 6 health. It may seem a little far-fetched that our brave heroes would just stand there without moving, but believe me, there will be times when escaping from darkness seems somewhere between difficult and impossible. With both their turns over, it's onto the darkness hunting step. If you ever need to place a new darkness tile, but all the heroes are already standing on darkness, then they suffer crush damage instead. There are a couple of important rules to remember when it comes to crush. First of all, you still draw a token from the rune bag even though you already know that you won't be placing a darkness tile. This token goes on the initiative track and it may have other in-game effects. Also note that crush damage is not the same as darkness damage. For example, a character immune to darkness damage will still suffer crush. Finally, crush inflicts non-preventable damage equal to the number of heroes in the game. So in our example, each hero suffers 2 damage. Now let's create a new map with different elevation levels so we can see how it affects darkness tiles. We'll stick with the top-down view, but keep in mind that this region on the right is at a higher elevation. And the lower map tile is water, by the way. It's the darkness turn on the initiative track, and we just drew a token with the T-shape. Devron is currently the strongest, so it targets him, and it can spawn from either of these spawn icons. Placing it here would get the darkness very close to Devron, but we must choose the option which gets even closer if there is one. Placing it here would reach Devron, but of course we can't have a darkness tile sticking off the edge of a dungeon tray. In these situations, the darkness tile gets replaced by 3 single space tiles, like this. The first tile goes on the spawn icon, the second tile creeps closer to Devron, and the third one reaches him. Which is bad news for Devron, who's now ankle deep in malignant darkness and questioning why he volunteered to be in this video in the first place. He also loses 2 hit points. As you can see, splitting into 3 smaller tiles is a diabolical technique which the darkness can use to slither between different elevations. But unfortunately for us, darkness can and will use that same technique anytime it helps to get closer to its target. Let's keep playing to see an example. The darkness hunting card tells us to draw a second token from the bag, and this time we get a long straight line. Of course, it's now targeting Willow. Note that it's impossible to place this tile so that it reaches Willow. We can't place it like this because darkness tiles never hang off the edge of the map, and we can't place it here because darkness tiles mustn't overlap. If we placed it here, it would get adjacent to Willow, but the darkness will never settle for second best. It will always reach its target if it can, and in this case splitting into 3 smaller tiles will enable it to reach Willow. So that's what it does. And she takes 2 points of damage. Note that you don't get to choose whether a darkness tile is or isn't replaced by 3 small tiles. It happens only when doing so brings the darkness closer to its target. By the way, we'll look at various terrain types, like this water terrain, in a later video. But for now, it's worth noting that when a space gets covered with a darkness tile, it loses any terrain effects. For example, water is normally difficult to move through, but these spaces at the bottom are no longer treated as water. We're almost done with learning how to place darkness tiles, and the rules we've already learned should enable you to resolve most situations. But there are just a few additional rules for situations which aren't so common. Let's skip forward a couple of rounds and suppose that the map now looks like this. It's the darkness turn, and we just drew this token from the bag. Devron is the strongest hero, so the darkness will try to reach him, but clearly this particular tile is just not going to fit on the board. So as you'd expect, it gets broken into 3 small tiles. The very first tile goes underneath Devron, catching him and inflicting 2 points of damage. And unfortunately for us, we have to place the second tile as well, treating it a lot like a brand new tile. It will chase Willow, who's now the strongest uncaught hero, and it catches her, inflicting 2 damage. At this point, all the heroes are standing on darkness, so we don't place the third tile. That goes back in the box. Notice that we haven't inflicted any crush damage. Crush only happens when you draw a rune token without placing any tiles. Moving on to this quite different map, we can see that there's a bridge over a lake of lava. In an earlier video, we saw how adjacency is unaffected by changes in elevation. That's just as true for bridges as it is for dungeon trays. For example, these 2 spaces are considered adjacent, even though they're at different elevations. The main difference with bridges is that the spaces directly above and below one another are also considered adjacent. So, in this example, if the strongest hero was standing on the bridge and we drew a rune token, the darkness would be able to catch her by splitting into 3 small tiles, like this. That would happen regardless of which token we drew from the bag. And here's the final darkness placement rule we'll look at. In an earlier video, we learned that if any character wants to move from the lowest elevation to the highest in a single step, then it will cost 1 additional point of movement. The same rule applies to darkness tiles. In this example, the darkness splits into 3 tiles. The first tile is placed on the spawn icon, then the leap upwards has a cost of 2 more tiles, so the third tile doesn't get placed. Now that we know how and where to place darkness tiles, let's take a quick look at the effect they have on figures standing on top of them. We've already seen how getting caught by darkness, or stepping in it, can damage our heroes. As if that weren't bad enough, there are 2 other effects which darkness can have, and neither of them are good news for us. Darkness can make monster attacks stronger and hero attacks weaker. More specifically, if a hero is standing on top of darkness, they suffer a penalty of -2 chance to hit to all their weapon attacks. And if a monster is standing on darkness, they get a bonus of +2 damage to their attacks, which is even worse. We'll see some examples shortly, but first I'll clarify something about the darkness damage which we've already seen. Each character can only suffer darkness damage once per turn. Remember that a round consists of many turns, which means that during a single round your hero may suffer darkness damage several times. To demonstrate this, let's imagine that Devron is having a really bad day. Let's play out a single round and see how many times he might suffer the effects of darkness. Devron acts first on the initiative track. He decides to move over here, and since his very first step takes him onto a darkness space, he immediately suffers 2 points of damage. After that, he can move around without suffering any more darkness damage for the rest of his turn. As already mentioned, if he'd decided not to move at all, then he would have suffered damage anyway, for ending his turn on top of darkness. Next, Devron performs a melee weapon attack, targeting the archer. But because he's standing on darkness, he has to subtract 2 from his dice roll. This causes him to miss, because of course it does. Eventually, Devron ends his turn, and the skeleton archer activates next. He's going to back away from Devron because he has a ranged attack, and he attacks from here. Because he's standing on top of darkness, his attack inflicts 2 extra points of damage. That's 5 damage altogether. Ouch! Normally, heroes can defend themselves with things like shield tokens and reactions, but this just isn't Devron's day, and he takes all 5 points of damage. As an aside, the skeleton archer's multi-shot ability lets him target Willow as well. And whenever he inflicts damage, he also inflicts poison. But the main takeaway for now is that monsters get +2 damage whenever standing on darkness. As we'll see in the next video, monsters are aware that darkness makes them stronger, and given the choice, they prefer to stand on top of it. Next it's Willow's turn, and she decides to target Devron with the assault action from her dungeon roll card. It says, target an ally. They may move 3 and may make a weapon attack of +1 damage. Because he's using a melee weapon, he'll need to be adjacent to his target, and unfortunately that's going to involve stepping on darkness. So he suffers 2 points of damage from that. Fortunately, he manages to reach a space without darkness, so he doesn't suffer a penalty on his attack roll. After his attack, Willow finishes her turn, and it's onto the darkness hunting phase. We draw a token from the bag, and unsurprisingly, the darkness manages to catch both heroes. Devron suffers 2 more points of damage, reducing his health to 0, knocking him unconscious and forcing him to take a trauma cube. That's the end of this round, and the end of this sobering lesson on the dangers of getting overwhelmed by darkness. Special thanks go to Devron for being such a good sport, and best wishes for a speedy recovery. And that's the end of this video. You should now be able to handle most situations involving darkness tiles, or at least you should have a better idea of how to place them. Whether you survive their effects is a different question entirely. In the next video, we'll return to the adventures of Maya and Lordrath, and we'll see how all these ideas and concepts come together in a real battle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.